first found out about BBSs?
Well, yeah, sort of. I'll tell you what happened to me, okay? In the early 80s, I had an Atari computer. I was learning to program, and a friend of mine from San Francisco gave me an S100 that had a modem in it, a 300 baud Hayes modem, no Hayes command set at that time. And I was a programmer, learning to program in Forth, and Forth the language. And I thought, well, I had seen my friend in the city log on to BBSs from his machine, and he had given me this S100. So I thought, well, I'll write a program to talk to this modem and see what happens. So I wrote a terminal program in Forth and looked for somewhere to hook up to, and discovered the BBS community. I was in Petaluma, California. At that point, I stopped programming because BBSing was so much more fun. So I'm at 300 baud, looking at that on the S100, and discovering every BBS, which there weren't too many. This was around 84. Every BBS in Petaluma, and then after 8 o'clock I could call Santa Rosa for free, so I did that too. Developed a list of BBSs and developed my handle, b0b, which I retain to this day as b0b.com. And then at one point someone posted a message, says, if you're hot in Forth, contact me, I'm hiring Forth programmers. So at the time I was building amplifiers for Mesa Boogie, wiring amplifier chassis, and I thought, well, this would be good. So I walked in with what I could piece together of a resume and the listing of the terminal program I had written. And the guy who owned Time Arts looked it over and said, well, that's pretty good. You say here on your resume that you take $26,000 a year. Is that okay? He said, sure, because it was twice what I was making wiring amplifiers. so I took that. And at this point, I'm not sysopping or anything. This was in '85, and so I became a professional programmer overnight, and all this stuff sort of paid off. Just the hobby of BBSing paid off financially right there by getting me a good job. And as Time Arts advanced, Time Arts wanted to have a BBS to distribute their software, so I set up a FIDO system for them, which I think was probably the first BBS I actually set up.
Why did you choose FIDO versus anything else?
Because it seemed real stable. I knew a lot of places were using it. It looked professional. It was a good package when trying to recall how you got it. I suppose it was downloaded. But it was a good, complete package with good documentation. There was a lot of help available for it.
Did you actually put it on the FidoNet, or was it just to run it by itself?
We had a node number. I'm trying to think what areas we actually shared, but I think it was probably just a sysop area that was shared or something. I'm having a hard time remembering. I don't think there was anything that the company actually wanted to share on FidoNet, Right. But we were connected. I think we shared the local message base, whatever that was called, Sonoma or something.
Was there any, and this is always the toughest question to answer, and I understand that, but was there anything unique about the Sonoma and other area BBSs that you might have found?
We like to think there was. I mean, the uniqueness was the people here. There was quite a community. especially in the late 80s and early 90s. It had a name, M-O-R-E, Motomers of the Redwood Empire. We'd meet maybe once a month or every 2 months at a pizza place to have some face-to-face. A lot of kids. It was really popular and a lot of fun at the time. There was an official more BBS list, and there was a splinter group who thought more was too conservative and called themselves SCUM, Sonoma County Users of Modems. So.
Was it a large splinter group, or was it?
No. I'd say at the meetings, the pizza meetings, we get maybe 40 or 50 people, and it wasn't a formal organization at all. I mean, there was no dues, there was no membership list. It's just the meetings get announced on BBSs and everyone shows up, and we reserve this room. For as long as they would have us, I think we degenerated into food fights at some point, and they kicked us out, and then things like that.
So the entire purpose of it was social?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Any house organs or anything like that? Or is there any, besides the memories, is there any lasting artifact of the modems of the Redwood Empire?
I don't know where, but I mean, we did publish the BBS list, and that was about it. Okay. I think it was an official list that got circulated quite a bit and printed up and distributed at the meetings. There were a couple very interesting boards. One of them was called Metropolis, that was run on an Atari. It was amazing that these people would build these, these huge social systems on, these tiny toy computers, with floppy disks, not even a hard disk. Metropolis was a role-playing board, a fictional comic book type city, all kids, and only one line, one person logs on at a time, updates everything their player does, and then the next person logs on. And we all kept these lists of, 20 BBSs or so in our dialers, and just would dial one after another until we got through without a busy signal.
Is there any BBS from that time that really sticks in your mind as the quintessential BBS?
Quintessential?
Yeah, some people I find have a favorite. In other words, like something like I'm able to say Sherwood Forest 2. A lot of people say my own, but other people will say, oh, there was one called this, and it was run by this crazy guy, and so on. So I always like to check if there's a strong memory of a BBS.
The things I found most interesting, and I don't really remember the names of them so much, were the Commodore 64 and Atari systems that were running on floppy disks, and were just, you could tell that they were very fragile, and that they were just a computer in a corner somewhere. And again, I can't mention any names. I'm not even sure of the names of the software, but it was absolutely amazing to me that here you would have a group of 50 people, socializing very actively every day through these toy computers that you could buy at Kmart. The things I did, if I can digress to that for a minute, I set up a system that only ran at night on an Atari ST using ST Adele, which was a variant of Citadel, which came from the CPM world, written in C, which was running on a 2 floppy system. and actually networked and got Usenet news groups. This would be like in 87 or 88, I set this up. Got rec.humor.funny, which is still alive, you know, and was able to send out mail on the internet, things like that. I made one phone call every night at 4 a.m. to a place in Georgia and swapped all the messages. After that, STADL was ported to the PC, which was sort of odd, and I hacked that code quite a bit to make it more to my liking, and called it b0b with a 0b0b Adele, and set that up also at Time Arts. After the FIDO system, we set up a b0b system at Time Arts and set it up at my house, and set up the Eclectic Garbanzo with it, which was a Santa Rosa system. That was some interesting stuff. Eclectic Garbanzo went through a lot of changes. I'm not sure, he's still online. I'm not sure what software he's running now. But at one point, he had 4 televideo CPM machines networked with 3 phone lines, and getting a multi-line BBS running on CPM machines was quite an accomplishment, I thought. I wrote a few subroutines for him, and but mostly it was Jim Bianchi and a guy named Sir Kix, who's quite a hacker. His motto was always, "Let me be your phone company." And now he is. Now he runs an ISP up north somewhere.
I think we had, he's named Jim Bianchi. I'm assuming you're the one who gave me that name.
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, likely. I know. Every once in a while, like, part of it is small world, but a lot of it is because a lot of the people who write to me because other people who wrote to me. And so they'll be like, and I'll find out, oh, the two of you were sysops together. What an interesting coincidence.
Well, the interesting thing about Jimbo is that he's a paraplegic, and he can barely talk. And yet he's a really bright guy, and like I said, he set up this 4 CPM system network, multi-line BBS, and he's very articulate online and very persuasive. One of the things I realized about the potential of change coming from online communications comes from my experience dealing with Jimbo. Jimbo is what you probably call a gun nut, or what a lot of people would call a gun nut. And when I came into this BBS world, I was totally anti-gun. I thought the world would be better without guns. And through various online conversations and discussions about guns with Jimbo, he turned my head around on that and totally changed my view of, guns, and my opinions have changed as a result of it. So this flagged to me the fact that BBSs could be an instrument for social change, which actually, now with the internet, we're seeing that sort of thing happening. That people's opinions do get changed from online discussions. And,
it's more the meta stories.
That's another thing that we saw back at that time was that couples would meet online, and romances would develop. People would move in together as a result of these romances and even get married, and that was amazing. Because these people would have never met without BBSs. Another thing we developed. I'm not sure how unique Sonoma County was. But one of the mottos of Moore was attack the issue, not the person. Now that might be common courtesy in other BBS communities, but it was like the golden rule in Moore. And now I run a internet BBS, you might call it, an internet message base. And that experience of the Sonoma County Moore group and that motto, attack the issue, not the person, is what I always come back to in moderating discussions there. And attacks on people are not allowed on my board, and to this day, and that actually works really well. It helps keep discussions civil, and it helps you attract a better group of users. And
once you keep the current group of users too.
It keeps the current group of users, yeah. I mean, whenever anyone says, remove me from the membership list, I say, why? And I probe them a bit and say, who was it and what did they say that this person took offense at? Today, the Steel Guitar Forum, which is what I run today, is like a natural evolution from the BBS world. And I really credit its success with my experience of sysoping and BBSing during the decade or so when that was possible.
And I know that there were boards in the early 80s that were basically up just for Flame Wars.
Yeah.
Flame War only boards.
Well, and Usenet's always been like that. You find a lot of that there. And as a matter of fact, I've always told people, well, if you really want that kind of discussion, go to Usenet.
While thinking of Moore, were there any member BBSs on Moore that were particularly bizarre that you found? Like you were amused they'd even be a part of any kind of named group?
Let's see. The most unusual thing I think was there was a swingers board, and to have them show up at this group that was largely a bunch of teenagers, they seemed a little bit out of place, but to me, but everyone had a good time.
What was it? Normally a swingers board would want to organize their own events.
I'm sure they did. That we're totally separate. Yeah, but the fact that the sysops of that would show up always sort of surprised me. Most of the boards didn't really have a theme at that point. It was just whatever the users would make of it, and since it was the same group of users on all of them, it was all just a big social thing,
Well, that's an interesting thing because, they're almost, depending on the location, depending on the place, and this is a factor I find changes. Some places were very competitive and coveting of their users, and other places there were so many users that another board popping up meant, okay, maybe people will be able to get in at 3 in the morning now because right now we can't. They'd be stuck at that problem that one line was not enough, but they couldn't afford 2, and so now they're getting calls, but they're having to put a time limit just to make it so that they can get everyone in. Actual engineering issues about trying to fit your users in, 250 users in one BBS, and they're all active, and you're screwed. So I find it does change. As you perceive it, it seems to be that you're saying that they were a little less competitive in that.
I didn't see much competition at all. One example of cooperation, there was a troublemaker, and like you said, you really don't want to name names because this person is unlikely to be interviewed by you. But his first name had 3 characters. His last name had 6 characters. He was known as a loser user, basically. No one wanted him around. At one point, one of the boards added his name, those 3 characters and 6 characters, to their profanity filter. So it showed up as 3 asterisks space 6 asterisks. Everyone picked up on that, and from then on, anytime anyone was mentioning him or talking about him, they'd do it in asterisks, and everyone knew who he was talking about. A number of boards did the same thing as the first board of adding his name to their profanity filter. There was a lot of cooperation. It really wasn't competitive from my view of it anyway. And I ran one of the boards. So.
What's your take on profanity filters?
Well, I still use one, but it only has like 3 or 4 words in it. And I'm sure you can guess what those are.
Bluegrass.
Banjo. Banjo is one of them.
Deliverance. Banjo, Deliverance, and probably Martin.
No.
Boggy.
Yeah. But I think it depends on your users, and if you really want to attract a broad base, I don't see anything wrong with censoring a few words that you wouldn't hear on television. I'm always amazed when people spell ass with 2 dollar signs, assuming that it would be in the profanity filter. Has that ever been a swear word? I don't know.
Yeah, one of the profanity filters is just an interesting debate is how much leeway the SysOp has on messages.
Oh yeah,
and there's always a sense of strong violation when one goes back and reads one's message and it says something different than what they wrote.
Yeah.
Even if it's the most minor of things, missing a sentence, asterisks added where you didn't expect them or something like that. I remember being on a message base recently that I'm on, and it edits them. So you say FARC and Shiat, and you say there's like another one, and I was always like, oh, everyone's being so cute by saying FARC and everything else. And then I wrote a message, used profanity. Suddenly I'm speaking like everyone else, and there's this vague sense of violation. Yeah,
that's true. Yeah, but also there's cultural differences. There's some people, profanity is a part of their everyday speech, and to other people it isn't. And those different cultures come together in a message base quite often. When I was working in a factory, I spoke very differently from what I do now that I have more of a white-collar sort of job because I was hanging out with different people and it was a different culture. So some people who don't talk like that don't even notice the profanity filter, but people who do say, hey, this is messing with my speech.
Ward Christensen on the first BBS tells me of, first of all, he didn't want anyone to post anything that wasn't related to computers, so he would just flat out delete anything that wasn't related to computers. So there was a guy who kept trying, he had to put in a filtering system because there was a guy who kept trying to sell his motorcycle. And this just wasn't allowed. But even funnier, and as time's gone on, I remember these stories, but I always can't remember if they're said on or off camera.
Yeah.
And I'm always annoyed when I tell everyone this great story and I realize I don't actually have the footage. But because there was so little space on his S100, he would go in, and anybody who put 2 spaces after a period, he'd go and make it 1. In his spare time, he'd go back and try to get all those bytes back.
Wow.
All those wasted bytes, because he just saw them as waste.
Yeah.
and I don't know if people picked up on that or not.
Dreamweaver does that. Today it does. I noticed that. I was making pages in Dreamweaver, and if I put 2 spaces in it, it concatenates them to 1. I'm sure the incentive is different. But
there was somebody, 2 guys I interviewed in Seattle told me about the what was its name? It was the Sugar Bunny? The Sugar Bunny filter. There was this girl named Sugar Bunny, and she would always write in all caps, and she would like say things and like incite people, and then come back, like basically cause trouble. And
spell her name with asterisks.
Yeah. So what they did was they took her, like basically they put a filter in. They assumed that anyone writing in all caps must obviously have not purchased a lowercase chip, or they're experiencing some sort of technical difficulty. So they put in a filter that takes your uppercase writing and puts in punctuation. I mean, uses the punctuation and does the top of them. But this caused a lot of trouble for Sugar Bunny. So Sugar Bunny figured out that if Sugar Bunny started with like a lowercase letter as the first letter, and then the rest of it uppercase, the filter wouldn't catch it. And so, and so that was a case where like the user was trying so hard for all uppercase, and the code is trying to stop them. There's actually an even more extreme example with a BBS called Pyroto Mountain in Canada, which was, some of them came down here, but you got points for playing the role-playing game, which was the whole point of the game. But you also got points for writing messages. And there was a program that went through your message and used this bizarre algorithm to figure out how intelligent your posting was, like how thought out it was in terms of its quality and style. And it was this weird algorithm. And that would earn you points in the role-playing part, because not only was that, but your intelligence was high and everything else. And so there's this weird, and if you wrote horribly, it would knock you down. And so there was this weird phenomenon that the author tells me he noticed, where people started to buy into the algorithm, what the algorithm was saying. Always punctuate, write in this thing. He wouldn't tell me the complete algorithm, but some of it involved the amount of words in a sentence, followed by, the fact that you were putting in different ideas, and so it was all like that. And people started to write like that more and more because it earned them points. So
were they really writing, or were they copying from elsewhere?
No, I think they were writing. I think it was a case of that.
Well, then that's good.
Yeah.
They're actually learning how to write better.
Yeah. This is very, obviously, as you can tell, across 180 hours of footage, you have some very odd stories, which now I just use in the later interviews to try to inspire people. If there's, through one thing worth asking is, going from FidoNet, which is it's relatively simple, but it's also menu driven, to something like a Citadel clone.
Right, which was dot commands and stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, how did you get that bug to go with Citadel?
I found Citadel really elegant, the single letter commands. And of course I rewrote it and reassigned them. No one around here was into Citadel at all. So basically my users didn't have any expectations of how it should work. So I took what were the common keystroke commands from a variety of BBS systems here and turn them into the dot commands for Citadel. And I liked its terseness. As a matter of fact, at one point, I don't know if you're aware of how Forth works at all.
Vaguely.
Forth code was organized into 1K screens, 64 by 16 characters. And it was very common in a Forth system, Forth being an interpreter, to have a screen editor that edited these 64 by 16 screens. And it occurred to me that a Forth screen file, which was, n number of 1K blocks, would actually work pretty well for BBS messages. So I wrote a BBS But I ran as a door from another system because, I mean, it was too dinky to be a real BBS. I called it baby BBS in fourth. And in that, I like the elegance of getting down to a small set of commands that were the most common in use, so that it would try to make it intuitive, you know. And so I use the commands from Citadel and the different ones that I had developed there. Once I got Citadel off of the ST over onto the PC where I could really program it, and I had a good C compiler and stuff, I really modified it quite a bit. Bobadel was pretty different, but it still did the networking. Yeah.
Was there any response from this? Citadel comes from Seattle, and it's heavily developed in Seattle. There's like a little hothouse of quick development of after runs and co-runs and everything else of Citadel.
Funny, a lot of what I saw was coming from Minneapolis.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's places where it pops up.
Yeah, it seemed to me that the biggest Citadel concentration. I remember dealing with some in Seattle, but it seemed like the biggest concentration I dealt with was in Minneapolis. And those people always amaze me, being in Minneapolis, which I consider to be the middle of nowhere, being a coastal person, and they consider to be the center of the universe. And that was sort of a culture shock to me. Yeah, imagining Minneapolis as the center of the universe was a stretch.
Minneapolis is, for a while, the center of the pirate world for Apple IIs in the early 80s.
How about that?
It worked out. There was a place called The Curse. There was Safe House. There were a couple others, and they essentially, are on the 612 area code, and they are extremely popular. Mm-hmm. And as a result, their versions of cracked games are the ones that survive to this day in the greatest numbers, because this is one of those things. But Seattle is where Citadel is invented, and where you have a lot of
CPM users group. Yeah.
And it's this guy named Drew Tarian, who his real name is like Rich Monasoon or something, and he creates Citadel in like 2 weeks, and then like the group of people keep developing it, and by 83, 84, it's pretty mature, and then it splinters, and then we had it in New York and everything else, but it's like the Wankel rotary engine, huge adherence to it, but it's completely can't use the same rules that you've been using with your other stuff, and that's the best part, is when somebody else opens up the hood and goes, what happened? That's what interests me about Citadel, is that it's such a intense break from the paradigm that BBSs were already settling into by 84, 85. So, do you continue to run BBSs up through 94, or is there a point when you stop?
I think I took my last one down in early 95. I wanted my phone line back. And then, of course, I discovered the internet and had a web page by 96.
Was there any specific event or clarion call that told you it was time to take the BBS down?
No, it was just I wanted to reclaim more time in my life.
Was there anybody else using Bobadel?
Outside of the area? I mean, I think it was just me and Jimbo for the most part. I have found references to it online on the internet, and they still have the source code somewhere. But I didn't distribute it widely. At one point, this is a little embarrassing. It seems strange. Someone got my software from me and put up a board, and I was providing technical support, and this board was supposedly for people who grew orchids. And apparently they were talking in code and exchanging pictures of the orchids they had grown. Well, it wasn't orchids. You know, I found out later they were busted for child pornography. And I wouldn't have wanted to be associated with them, you know, and police never came knocking on my door about it, but I'm sure I was in the membership list. I don't know, maybe they looked into me, I don't know. I thought that was pretty disgusting. They would do that and even use my software for that, but it just goes to show when you write a program, you never know what it will be used for.
As a developer, I don't know when it happens. Do you rethink doing further development, or do you think of this as just as like a one-off case?
Obviously a one-off case. You can't control what the data is that goes through a program. You know, you can just, I mean, as a programmer, you just worry about the nuts and bolts of getting the program to work correctly. For example, you know, someone could use PrintShop, which I also worked on, to make very obscene things, I'm sure, you know, but hey, you know, we still sell it at Walmart, you know.
You just don't sell it with the right kind of additional pack.
But it does import images, you know, from any source.
Yeah.
And so you always have that.
In fact, it's much more prevalent now because a program that's introduced on the internet now, if it has another use that isn't expected, that use will make itself manifest extremely quickly and among a large group of people.
Sure.
So these guys who write, like, you know, the big problem now is like guys who do peer-to-peer stuff.
Right, peer-to-peer file sharing.
Right.
Who would even know writing a program like that from a programmer's standpoint? You wouldn't even think, oh, this would be good for music piracy.
Right.
You know, unless you were, you know, bent that way. But when you're writing a program, you know, you don't think about what the data is that's going through. It's just a data stream.
Right.
You know.
Because one of there's one that I use called BitTorrent by a guy named Bram Cohen, and it allows you to pull down images or pull down files, and while you're downloading, you're also uploading to everyone else downloading. So there's still a central server, but it's like everyone shares the load pulling it down. So that the main one doesn't get hammered. The more people who use it, the faster it goes because there's more people involved. And he puts up two examples. Because one of the advantages of this is that you can have extremely large files and not worry about losing them because it self-heals. The two things he offers up are a complete archive of every speech at the conference that he first introduces this at.
Yeah.
So that's like 300 megabytes of file. And the other one is some donated porn, like just a 200 megabyte AVI file of some porn that somebody sends him to use as an example file. And he puts both of those up. Over time, it's become most popular in its use for fan subtitled anime and Linux distribution.
How about that?
It's two different things. Is that it is the
you
anime
never know.
fans said, here's some stuff we can use it with, and the Linux people, you know, they put up, oh, here's the new Red Hat ISO. It actually kind of breaks the paradigm of places like Red Hat who say, you know, well, you can download, we're offering it, but if you want Zippy, go here. And this is a way for them to offer it, really, you know, taking advantage of it. And, you know, I'm sure he may have thought that perhaps it would be used for music or for movies or stuff, but the fact that those two groups would adopt it with such fervor, you know. I won't focus on the...
Well, you know, another interesting aspect, you know, I always view things, being a programmer, I tend to view things from a technological point of view. but my wife saw that I was involved in BBSs, and she's not very technical at all. She was doing genealogy with her. She always got the computer that I left behind when I went on to the next one. She was doing genealogy, and she heard that there was genealogy BBSs. One of the local BBSs, Fido, was carrying a few genealogy boards. You know, so I hooked up a modem for her and showed her, hooked up a terminal program, showed her how to log on. So she really didn't know much about, and doesn't to this day know much about how a computer works, but it was turnkey enough for her to get in there and start posting and interacting with people. And through FidoNet, these people were all over the place and doing her research and helping people out. A few years later, when I went to work for Broderbund, Broderbund had a policy at the time that any employees could get one each of all their products for free. So, and they owned Banner Blue, who does Family Tree Maker. So, whoopee, we get all the Banner Blue CDs for free. Got one called BBS Messages, and lo and behold, there's her messages being sold by Broderbund, which she was pretty annoyed at. You know, and you get to wondering about the legalities of taking this stuff, a large body of knowledge that was accumulated on FidoNet, and burning a CD of it and selling it. And we often wondered about that because since she wrote this, doesn't she own the copyright to it? You know, we've never taken it very far, but.
Is there any unusual situation or event, and you've already given me a couple, that you would find it hard to translate for people now? Like people who would only use the internet. Like something unique to BBS's or a BBS experience that you had, which, I mean, you can't bring it up when people are telling stories because all their stories are, you know, oh man, ICQ was down for 3 days. And your story is something involving, you know, getting this just right, or a BBS going down for a strange reason, or anything like that.
Most people draw a blank when you mention BBSs. They have no idea what you're talking about. And I mean, I don't think this might not answer your question, but what I have the hardest time communicating to people is what it was. The fact that there was a computer in my house that was hooked up to a phone line that never rang with voice, you know, and there was always modems. In the 80s, when you ordered a computer, you didn't order it with a modem. They didn't come with modems. And if you wanted a modem, people would say, why? And you say, well, to hook it up to the phone. Why would you hook your computer to the phone? I mean, today it's a given that you're going to go online. If you buy a computer, it's an internet appliance. And it's assumed that the main reason for buying a computer is to go online. But that wasn't the case back then. And the fact that I had a computer that was running 24 hours a day answering the phone was just so alien to anyone I talked to. You know, not so much the people I worked with, but people, you know, I mean, I hung out with musicians, I always have, and musicians thought I was nuts. What are you doing? What is that? You know, BBS, what is that? Same with family, you know, and, oh, he's into computers, but why does he have this computer running 24 hours? What's going on there? That's not an incident, I know, but it's always been really hard to communicate. And I think maybe now with the internet, people are starting to understand a little more what I was doing back then. But still, I mean, a lot of people who use the internet don't use message bases. Still, you know, they just, you know, Google search and shop and go to eBay. You know, so.
Answering my question with a better story is perfectly acceptable.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not, you know, what I'm doing.
Yeah, I know. But really, I'm trying to think of any incidents
some of it, I have a lot of stories from people, and so I mean, it's not. It's just every once in a while someone will mention something. The Organ Club one is an interesting story. I mean, it's an thing where like you just don't expect your BBS in that fashion, you know, that kind of a thing happening.
I didn't expect it at all. Yeah.
I have cases of BBSs running that, you know, I mean, just strange, like people's relationship with their BBS. Some people, you know, there are no constants. You know, not everybody ran it for this reason. Not everybody didn't, you know, took them down. I had one guy who took it down. I interviewed him right at the beginning. He took it down because he had this girlfriend and she wanted to call him late at night, and he had already had his own phone line, which was for the BBS. And so it was like, well, either she can call me at night or the BBS stays up. And that was the end of the BBS. You know, he's like, out of the way.
What was odd, the Atari ST, the first ST Adele that I put up, was actually in our bedroom. And being with the floppy disk, you know, I mean, we'd hear all night the modem connect and the disk lined up and everything. Oh, there was a call, you know. That lasted a while in that room, and finally I dropped a phone line into the dining room so we wouldn't do that.
Different, you know, it's an interesting thing. People running BB, I mean, the places where people choose to run their BBSs. There have been 4 or 5 people I've talked to who ran the BBS in their bedroom, and it's just, you know, that's something for an outsider is unfathomable that you would have this noise-making appliance running 24 hours in your room next to where you're trying to sleep.
Yeah.
And then occasionally you're married, which is even funnier.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. She's very patient, but the way she looked at it, well, this hobby of his got him that good job. So.
That makes sense. Right.
So I'll put up with anything.
If he owns a boat and he met the guy while boating that gave him his current job, let him go out on the boat whatever he wants to. Obviously, it works out for him. There was one couple who I interviewed who they had 2 lines, and they had the phone ringer on in their bedroom. I don't know what they're thinking, but they had 2 lines. They had a role-playing game, and both people could play and chat.
Uh-huh.
And this guy's wife discovered that these other 2 married people were having an affair using the role-playing game to plan their trysts. And this drove the wife living bonkers.
Sure.
So every time the phone rang, she'd just kind of go over to see if it was one of the 2 of them. And if both came on, she'd disconnect one. Because she took it as, you know...
They're not going to use my computer.
Well, it was more than that. It was that this adultery is happening in my bedroom.
Yeah, in the bedroom, yeah.
She perceived it as, you know, the event where it was taking place is their bedroom.
Yeah.
And so it was an even more, you know, it was like as offensive as it could possibly get, you know. So, you know, their relationship with I mean, you know, the BBS being used that way, because I mean, they were just trying to run a nice little role-playing setup. Now, did you keep the Atari to the end, or did you switch?
Oh, after I got a PC, what happened was Orc came out with a version of ST Adele for the PC, and about that time I was working for Time Arts, and I was doing a project of Lumina on the Tandy 1000, which was an 80186 MS-DOS machine. And so I had finished up that program, and the company had no use for this Tandy machine. We'd shipped the product, and it had tanked. So I decided to move the BBS over to that because it had a whopping 5 megabyte hard disk, and there was a version of the software available for it. And what was the question? Did I keep the Atari? So I did move the BBS over to that, and then I started using the Atari to write algorithmic music because I had the MIDI ports. I got a MIDI synth and actually put out a cassette album in '91 of music untouched by human hands on Atari ST. which since the synth made very natural sounds, people assumed it was a really bizarre jazz band.
As I get to the end of this tape, was there any difference in being an Atari in the BBS world that you found? Did you run into anything?
And the bigger difference was running Citadel, because Citadel was very uncommon here. I mean, the Atari ST was what I was used to. It was my machine at home. I never did get one running with CPM. Actually, my CPM equipment was confiscated. Sir Kix, I had lent it to him to play with, and all my CPM user group discs and stuff, the 8-inch drives. And unbeknownst to me, he was hacking his way into insurance company mainframes and got a knock on the door at 4 a.m. They always come at 4 a.m., don't they? And they took away all his computer equipment, much of which was mine.
That's one way to get out of a platform.
Yeah, so I sort of lost CPM. I still ran CPM. Of course, the Atari ST was, in fact, CPM 68K under the hood. So, and the calls were similar. So I was able to program in it for the Atari pretty easily, using Forth and the Forth assembler. Though I never had a official work project programming on the Atari, I did a lot of hobby projects on it.
Okay, that's it.